Have you ever shared a small truth with someone you trusted, only to wish later that you had stayed silent, because one gentle sentence quietly changed everything in your life? We often believe that people who smile beside us are safe, that people who listen patiently truly care, and that those who work next to us will guard our words. But sometimes the closest ears are not the safest, and sometimes the kindest smiles carry careless hearts. This is the story of how one weary man learned that lesson too late. In a busy city filled with noise, smoke, and long working days, there lived a simple man named Daniel. He was a factory worker who had spent nearly a decade of his life inside the walls of a large cement factory at the edge of town. Every morning, before the sun lifted itself into the sky, Daniel woke quietly, washed his face with cold water, ate the same modest breakfast, and pulled on his faded blue uniform that always carried the smell of dust and sweat. His days followed a familiar pattern. He walked the same cracked road, passed the same tea stall, nodded to the same guard at the factory gate, and joined the long line of workers who lifted and carried heavy cement bags from one place to another. Inside the factory, the machines screamed without rest. The air was thick, the floor always gray, and the hours moved slowly. Daniel's hands were rough, his shoulders stiff, and his back ached almost every night. Yet he rarely spoke about his pain. He believed that honest work was a blessing, and that silence was strength. When his body hurt, he reminded himself that many people carried heavier burdens than his own. At home, Daniel had a small family waiting for him. His wife managed the household with care and patience, stretching every bit of money wisely. His young son ran to him each evening when he returned, wrapping his arms around Daniel's dusty legs, without caring about the gray powder that covered his clothes. Those simple hugs were the reason Daniel never complained, never shouted, and never thought of leaving his job. At the factory, Daniel was known as a quiet and dependable worker. He never argued, never arrived late, and never caused trouble. Because of this, he trusted the people around him, especially his co-workers, whom he saw every day, shared meals with during breaks, and labored beside for long hours. One of those co-workers was a man named Robert. Robert had a friendly face, laughed loudly, asked about Daniel's family, and spoke as if he cared deeply. Over time, Daniel began to believe that Robert was someone he could trust. But inside Daniel's body, something was slowly wearing down. The work remained heavy, and the days felt longer than before. By afternoon, his legs felt weak, and his mind grew tired from the endless noise and repetition. Still, he did not feel anger toward the factory or bitterness toward his supervisors. He only wished for one lighter day, one small break, just enough for his body to recover. One evening, after an especially hard shift, when the bags felt heavier than usual and his back burned with pain, Daniel walked home with Robert. The sun hung low in the sky, painting the streets in tired colors. As they passed through the factory gate, Daniel stopped for a moment, took a deep breath, and spoke words he had never said aloud before. He admitted softly that his bones were aching, that the loading work was becoming difficult for him, and that perhaps, just perhaps, he might ask the supervisor for lighter work for one day so he could rest. He did not say he hated the job. He did not say he wanted to quit. There was no anger in his voice, only honesty and tired hope. Robert nodded, placed a hand on his shoulder, and said he understood that everyone gets tired. Hearing those words made Daniel feel lighter. Being heard felt like relief, and he believed he had shared his burden with a friend. What Daniel did not know was that Robert enjoyed feeling important. He liked being the one with information, the one people listened to. The next morning, during the break near the tea stall, Robert leaned close to another worker and spoke in a low voice. He said that Daniel was unhappy and could not handle the work anymore. The other worker looked surprised and asked if Daniel was planning to leave. Robert shrugged and said maybe he was fed up. With those small changes, the truth began to bend. Tiredness became unhappiness, and a wish for rest became a desire to leave. As the hours passed, the words traveled from mouth to mouth. Each person added a little fear, a little imagination, and a little drama. By the end of the day, the story no longer belonged to Daniel at all. By the next morning, the rumor had grown beyond control, moving faster than Daniel's tired body ever could. One worker told another that Daniel was planning to quit. Another said he was spreading negative thoughts. Soon, a floor manager heard that Daniel was becoming a problem, someone who might disturb others. Worried about his own position, the manager passed this fear upward, changing the words again until the shift supervisor believed Daniel was turning workers against the factory. When the story reached the senior manager, it became dangerous, filled with panic and blame. No one thought to stop and ask Daniel himself, because rumors are easier than truth. The final version reached Mr. Caldwell, the factory owner, a proud man who valued loyalty above all else. Already worried about losses and unrest, he heard only that Daniel was a threat, a worker who might leave and encourage others to follow. Instead of seeing a tired man, he imagined rebellion. In anger, he decided that an example must be made quickly. The next morning, Daniel arrived, as he always did. He greeted the guard, punched his time card, and picked up his gloves, unaware that his life was about to change. Before he could reach his work area, 2 security guards stopped him and asked him to follow them. Inside the office, without a chance to speak, he was accused of betrayal, spreading negativity, and planning to harm the factory. No matter how calmly Daniel tried to explain that he only asked for lighter work for one day, his words fell into empty space. The decision had already been made. He was dismissed on the spot, his final pay placed on the table, his name quietly marked as unwanted in nearby factories. When Daniel walked back through the factory gate he had passed for years, whispers followed him like shadows. In the days that followed, the story outside grew even worse. People said he was dishonest, that he was dangerous, that he could not be trusted. Wherever he went to look for work, doors closed before he could explain. At home, his wife watched him grow quieter each day. His son stopped asking when his father would return to work. Bills piled up, savings disappeared, and the man who once believed the world was mostly fair began to understand how quickly trust can collapse. After many sleepless nights, Daniel made a quiet decision, not from anger, but from exhaustion. One early morning, before the city fully woke, he packed a small bag, kissed his sleeping son on the forehead, and left to search for work far away, in a place where his name was still clean. Weeks later, while reviewing old security footage for another issue, the factory manager noticed Daniel in his final days. He saw him working alone, speaking to no one, showing no anger, no secret meetings, only silent labor. A heavy truth settled in his chest. When he finally asked Robert what Daniel had truly said, the simple answer came out. Daniel was just tired and asked for lighter work for one day. When this truth reached Mr. Caldwell, regret followed, but repair did not. Daniel was already gone. His position stood empty, his name a quiet reminder of a mistake made too easily. The lesson lingered, unspoken but clear. Not everyone who listens truly cares. Words once released cannot be gathered again. And sometimes, silence is not weakness, but protection. Remember this one truth: silence can save what trust destroys. Silence can save what trust destroys. Before you share your pain, pause and ask yourself if the listener is safe or simply curious. Choose carefully where your words rest. If this story touched you, take a moment to like, share, and subscribe for more quiet lessons that protect the heart.